My name is Martin. I'm going to talk about illustrations using Adobe Illustrator and also Photoshop. So it's not only about Illustrator, it's all about drawing with these applications. And I am going to show you techniques as well, and just in general, again, give you a feel of what's possible to achieve in Photoshop and Illustrator when you are using it for art. This really is called digital art, what I'm going to talk about now, and it became a huge part of the industry, of the creative industry, and it's definitely considered as art. So we have traditional art and we have digital art now. And I've seen digital galleries as well, where you go in and you actually have all the, not necessarily on screen, but actually printed version of the digital art that people created in Photoshop and Illustrator. So there's lots of artwork out there which has been created digitally compared to the original watercolor paintings or traditional techniques. So I am going to try to show you a couple of examples here just to give you a rough idea of what's possible with these applications. These are not my illustrations. I just picked a couple of references from Behance. We talked about Behance earlier on. And just to show you a variety of styles that can be achieved with these applications. These are all done in Illustrator. So this is the vector art that you can create in Illustrator. And you can see that there is a big variety in style that you can achieve. But what is common among these examples is usually the sharp edges, I mean clean edges, I would say. So although there's lots of different styles, there's always like well-defined sharp edges, because that's the main attribute of working with vectors. Even if you do something more grungy like this, it will still have those nice, clearly defined edges and usually outlines as well, which makes it more illustrative and less photographic, which is the style when we work in vector graphics. Although in vectors you can also create something very photorealistic, it's not really the tool for photorealistic illustrations. So just to show you, that's not the one I wanted to open up. I think, let me just check if I have that example with me, but probably I don't have that here. Yeah, that example is not here. So what I just wanted to explain is that Illustrator is better to use for something that you don't intend to make it look like it's a photograph. You want to make it look like it's an illustration, right? While in Photoshop you can actually draw in a way that it will look very photorealistic. That's the better tool for that. So if your aim is to create something very photorealistic, that's more Photoshop. And in Illustrator, of course, it's not just illustrations that you do. You can also do branding, which is a crossover, like logo design is a crossover between illustration, typography, and general graphic design and composition, like this one, for example. Then you have all kinds of illustrations for fashion, which is again a typical example of Illustrator. There's another one which is more like a badge or branding. And then compared to this is Photoshop, where you have, for example, concept art, which is a huge area where Photoshop is used to create artwork. And this is mainly used in the entertainment industry, mainly for films and games, when they come up with an idea and they have to show the director and all the people involved in the filmmaking what's their idea of a scene or a character or even a part of the whole story. So this is like the brainstorming part of a whole creation of a film or a game, where they come up with these nice scenes. And these can be created all in Photoshop from scratch without any photo references. Of course, usually these artists have photo references and they set up a lot of brushes which can create like the snowfall very quickly, so they can save a lot of time. But it's amazing how quickly they can create something like this. In a couple of hours, actually, they can create something like these, or definitely less than a day's work. So there's a character design, and you can see that they are still like paintings, but they are more photorealistic because there's like the light effects and stuff like that, and the whole thing is more realistic than the other type of illustration which you can do in Illustrator. So again, just show you a couple of additional stuff. Again, look at the lights. It's again more realistic, even though the character is a bit more comical, or on this one as well. These caricatures of characters can be also really nicely created, and that's again another example. And also quick sketches can be created in Photoshop for like industrial product design, like a car, for example. These concepts generally created in Photoshop if they are done digitally. Okay, so now that we have this brief overview, I would like to also show you, like with the same drawing, if you would do the same thing in Illustrator and Photoshop, something like this you would get. So you would get a much more flat version in Illustrator, which you see on the left. That's the vector version, which can be much more realistic if you do it in Photoshop. But of course, even the Illustrator one can be improved much more. But it's just the general idea to decide which style you are aiming for. The more flat and crisp edges, or the more soft and more realistic, photorealistic result. And the tools that I'm using, I'm not promoting Wacom because I don't have any connection to them, but I've been using their products all the time. These are the types of products they have. I'm actually using the one in the middle at the moment, an Intuos, but these are really cool. I have one of these Cintiqs at home as well. You can draw directly on the screen. Then they have these inklings when you draw on paper, but it digitalizes your drawing, and then you can upload it to the computer. So even though you draw on paper, it still has a digital version. And then they have also all kinds of different options you can use on iPads as well. So it's a very, very cool product family. It's worth looking into it. So if you are interested in art, definitely check out Wacom. Okay, so for some reason, we don't need that. Okay, so let me just go to, first of all, the Illustrator folder. And one of the things I would like to explain to you before we do anything is how important it is to learn, if you are working in Illustrator, how important it is to work with the pen tool. So the pen tool might seem a bit complex and difficult to use, but it's actually the only thing you need is practice. So you need to understand how it works. It's quite simple and straightforward. When you click, you create corner points. When you click and hold and drag, you create smooth points. And that's when you start to create these curves. And each curve will have anchor points. So between the curves, you will always have the anchor points. And essentially, it's all about creating these paths, the curved segments, when you are drawing. So for example, if we bring in an image into Illustrator, I'm just going to place this into Illustrator. Let me just create a new document. Okay, and I'm just going to place that illustration in. It's again a scanned illustration. Place it in, and just did this quick sketch on paper, and now I would like to have a digital version of this. So what would I do next? Well, remember, if you guys were here on the first presentation I did on the creative compositions, there we did a live trace or image trace option, which we can also try here. And in this case, you can even use the default one. So I just click on image trace, and let's see what happens. Now, it does a really bad job because there's not even enough contrast on the scanned image. So what can we do in that case? Well, first of all, I need to, before bringing in this image into Illustrator, I need to open it up in Photoshop, and in Photoshop use an adjustment which is called levels. So image adjustments levels can bring up or increase the contrast. So look, when I drag this black line up, the black point, increase the black point, then it becomes much higher, the contrast will improve. And then it will be much easier for Illustrator to find these details. If you want to clean up the lots of little scribbly lines, you can drag the white point down as well. So white point down, see, it removes the scribbly lines, and you can still add a bit more density on the blacks. So something like that I'm happy with. I'm going to save this separately, choose Save As. sketch 2, and I'm just going to call it edited. Okay, so now I can bring that into Illustrator, file, place in Illustrator, and we should be able to get the image there. Now let's see what happens if we use the default option on this now. So I'm just going to make it smaller a bit so it fits on the artboard, something like that. So let's see, if we choose again just the default image trace, it's a little bit better. We can see more details, but it's still losing a lot of detail. So what you can do after this is clicking on the option here on the top, the image trace panel, in which you can change the threshold. Now the way the threshold works is that if the more lines you want to see, you just simply drag it to more. The less lines you want to see, then you drag it down to less. So quite simple and easy to remember. If I drag it up to more, then it's going to reveal more of the original lines, and then I can add even more and more of it. Now this is great, it's getting closer to what I originally wanted to see, but the only problem, if you do this, most of the times you will end up having lots of like rogue lines that you don't really need. So, some details like this which just capture the way I was scribbling, but it's not really something I intend to use in the final artwork. So it's not really nice and clean, the edges, which can be a style. So if that is your style, that's what you are aiming for, then it's good. Otherwise it's not really nice. So if you are aiming for something more along the lines of these illustrations, so let me just go back here and maybe show you, let's say this one. This is obviously a very nice clean illustration. So if you are aiming for something like that, then you definitely need to use the pen tool to draw these shapes. So let me show you, going back to Illustrator, what I would do instead of doing this is to get rid of the tracing. So I would just simply go back to source image here on the top. I choose source image so I can see the original image, and I would do manual tracing. So I can even get rid of this image trace option here on the top. Go to the layers panel, create a new layer. I can call that layer drawing or whatever, and then this layer at the bottom can be the original scan, and double clicking on that layer here in Illustrator brings up the layer options, in which I usually choose the option called template. If you set it to template, that automatically dims the image on that layer out by 50% and locks that layer as well, so you can't work on that layer. See, there's the little lock. So it means I have to go onto the drawing layer, and it's exactly the same thing what you would do traditionally to trace over an image. So you put it on the light table and then you draw over that. So it's exactly the same thing. So now on that drawing layer I will start drawing, and this is where it becomes really important what I'm going to do, because when you are drawing in Illustrator there's several tools that you can use. And depending on which way you prefer to work, you can choose whichever technique you like. I'm going to try to show you as much as I can here. So first of all, let's say you don't have a drawing tablet, you only have a mouse. So what would you do when you only have the mouse? No problem, you can still create amazing artwork in Illustrator and in Photoshop as well. Because with the pen tool, really, you don't need a tablet. With the pen tool, you can work with the mouse easily. Some even say that it's better to use a mouse with the pen tool because you have more precision that way. So what I'm doing with the pen tool is trying to draw around a shape. Let's say I'm going to draw around one of these shapes here. Maybe let's draw around this here. So I'm going to just draw this first shape by click and dragging and creating the curves. And before I do that, just show you, pen tool works this way, that I create straight lines whenever I click, and if I click and drag, that creates a curve. Now another thing which is useful to know in Illustrator, if you click and drag, it always tries to follow the lines you already have before. So for example, you can see before I start drawing, it already shows me the line that I'm going to create. So if I have a line like this, it's going to go always trying to follow that curve that was there before. If I want to draw in a completely different angle, let's say I want a sharp angle and go backwards, then I will have to click on this last anchor point to get rid of that last handle point, and now I can draw the other way, so I can create an angle like that. So see, by default, you can only draw a continuation of the previous curve. If you want to break that, you have to click on the last anchor point, and then you can go backwards as well, or any direction. Again, if you want to quickly switch to a corner point, click on this, and then there's a corner point there. Okay. Other thing you should remember is even if you clicked already and started drawing your curve, you can still move the last anchor point around if you hold down space. It's also very useful. So you place it somewhere down, and then if you hold down space, you can still move it. And when you let go space and still hold the mouse, that means you can still change the angle of the curve. So you can really align it in a way you want it to. Okay, so space is another very, very important, useful technique. And obviously, the further away you drag these handle points from the anchor point, the bigger the curve gets. I mean, the further away it will curve out. Okay, so space is another one. And then one last one is if you want to change a point which you already created, just use the right arrow tool. And with the right arrow tool, you click on a point and you can move it around and change the position of any of these points. And that's also a new feature in CC 2014, or maybe even on CC. I'm not sure if they introduced it there or later. But these corner editing options, you can click on any corner and turn it into a rounded corner or back to a sharp corner. This is a quite new feature, but it helps a lot. So this little point is the control point which can change the corner radius. It's very useful, and even if you have several points selected, so I'm just going to select several points at the same time, now you can see I can control all of them at the same time, so I can add curves on all of them or remove the curves on all of them. How cool is that? So easy to do. So that helps a lot in drawing and illustration and in general in design. So again, if I use the right arrow to select all of these, they are all sharp corners. I can very quickly add the round corner on them, and look how nice it became. So that's one thing to know about the pen tool. But another thing which is also very useful to know about it is if you draw things and you don't really like the way your shape looks like, let's say this is something, I don't know, it's supposed to be something, but I want to make this look better. Another very handy tool to combine with the pen tool is the smooth tool. That's under the pencil tool. So if you click and hold on the pencil tool, you can switch to the smooth tool, and it has a brush size as well, which can be increased by double clicking on it. You can also control the accuracy. The size of the brush can be increased with the square bracket keys on the keyboard. For now, it's fine the way it looks. And look what I can do with it. I can draw over details and I can refine them. I can even turn this into a corner. I can refine that there as well. And already I have a better version of this shape. So the lines look a bit more fluid and there's no breaks in the line. So smooth tool is really cool. But then smooth tool tends to, create lots of unnecessary anchor points, which can be always simplified with another feature in Illustrator. If you go into the object menu, you can find this simplify option on the path. So you go object, path, and then choose simplify. Okay. And if you turn on preview, you can see, obviously by default it does a little bit too much simplification, but this can be changed. If you increase curve precision, then you can get a much closer path to the original one. But see that I show you before and after. So that was before, this is after. But see how much it simplified it. The original path has 13 anchor points. The new one has only 6 points. Okay, so it's half the anchor points than before, and still the shape looks almost exactly the same. There's not much difference. So you can always get away with the simplification if you increase the curve precision. And you can also play around with angle threshold and so on and so forth. You can also turn all your lines into straight lines. That's another use of simplify feature. If you want to quickly turn everything into straight lines but still maintain the original outline or silhouette as much as possible, then that's also a good way to use this. Okay, if you increase angle threshold, that simplifies it quite a lot. Okay, so now that we went through these, let me show you how I actually draw over these details here in the illustration. Okay, so we already know how to draw with the pen tool, so let's see what I do in this case. I would draw this way, that I actually, when there's a big curve, I always click in halfway, not trying to cover the whole curve in one. I click in halfway, and then I click the next one as well. And you can see I'm using space to move back and forth. And what I'm looking for is to make sure that the handle points don't overlap the actual drawing. So when the handle point goes over it, that's not good. You have to make sure that it don't overlap. It more like it leads on to whatever comes next. So here you can see I created the handle point like that. So my next curve is very easily fits onto the continuation. Here as well, look, because it nicely goes along the edge, the next point I just simply click there and it already looks quite good. After this I can just maybe smooth this part out a bit here on the top. I can just draw over it a couple of times until I'm happy with that shape. Then I can draw the next shape, and this is the cool thing about Illustrator, that you can actually draw on top of previous shapes, so you don't have to worry about, like, just to explain it to you, I wouldn't draw this separately and that separately. I would simply draw over this previous one and then decide which one should be on top of the other one. So I'm just going to draw this angle here, draw the other one, go up, and then close this again. It's better to click on the top. See, again, that's always a good technique to do. And then finalize that shape there. Then use the smooth tool and just smooth this out a bit. So it already looks quite good. Now, if I decide to have this behind the other shape, I just go to my layers and change the order by dragging it down a bit. So immediately it goes back, but I can always change my mind depending which one I want in front. Because they are both filled shapes, I can even select them and assign a color to them. Let's say I want this color to be used. Okay, now after this point, I can decide whether I need the outlines or not. I can always get rid of the outlines by using the stroke. I can set it to 0 point, and then if I want, I can just change the color on one. If you want to make slight adjustments to colors in Illustrator or InDesign, it's better to use the color panel. And to get a quick color panel, instead of the swatches here, shift click on this. So clicking on it will give you swatches, shift click will give you the color options, where you can really check what you want. Maybe I just want one of them a little bit darker or a bit more red, then I can change it. You see, even a little bit of adjustment on the color will separate these two clusters and make it a bit more 3D as well. Okay, so now that we saw how I draw with the pen tool, let's see how I can draw without the pen tool using only shapes. So even with shapes you can do a lot. What you can do, for example, is to use the rounded rectangle tool and draw a rectangle. It's good to know that using up and down arrows, when you draw with the rounded rectangle, you can change the roundness of the rectangles on the fly. So I can align it as much as I can to the shape that was there already. By the way, since CC 2014, there is an option which is quite annoying. Whenever you create a rectangle or rounded rectangle, the transform panel will come up automatically. It just pops up. And that's an option you can turn off. In the drop down, there's the show on rectangle creation. Well, that's one of the things I take off already. I don't like that. I don't know why it's needed. So we can get rid of that quickly. And then what I would do in this case, I don't need the fill color. I just need the outline of this. So I use stroke. And after this point, what I would do is to change the shape a little bit around. So I would probably select this point here, drag it closer to that side, and then I can change how this corner is laid out. So I'm going to drag both of these handle points closer to the side I need. Then I can change the angle there a bit as well, and already that's much closer. This is already very close. When you select corner points, you can also use the arrows on the keyboard. You can use up and down, right and left, and you can very finely move things around. You can also do that here with these lines on the top. And then you can see already I'm getting quite close. I'm only using my arrows really in this case. The only problem is here on the top I need a little bit more of an angle. But what you can also do in these cases is to click in the middle with the pen tool, which adds an additional point, drag it up, and then add the curve on it, like that. And then it already gets closer to it. If you want, you can always make it bigger, of course. But for now, let me just make it a little bigger, drag it down, something like that. And of course, don't forget, we can always use the a smooth tool as well. So even here, if I want to have a curve, I would add the point in the middle. I just have to make sure I click on the path itself, something like that. And then I just, oh, that wasn't on the path. Yeah, let me select the path, zoom a bit closer, create a point on it, direct selection tool, drag it out, and then we can turn it into a curve. Or you can also use the pen tool. If that's too slow, the curve option, hold down Alt, and then you can really specify how your curve should look like, something like that. And then these things that happen on the edges can be always smoothed out with the smooth tool. So you can see how nicely, once I have roughly the shape in place, I can always improve the edges. So you can see that it's up to you, whichever you prefer, either to start with a shape and then just distort it around until you get the shape you need, or just simply draw around with the pen tool. So both techniques are useful, and both techniques can be used in Illustrator. And another thing which is very useful is using Shape Builder. Shape Builder is a technique to combine shapes in order to create something new. So let me show you that as well. We might be able to return back to this example depending how much time I have. But for that, I have another example here. This one, I'm just going to place this into Illustrator as well. So place Illustrator, and I'm going to move this to the side. Let's create quickly a new artboard for this, so just we have a bit more organized workflow. Okay, now on this one, this is just the example I would like to draw, but I'm going to put this on the side and show you how quickly we can create this Celtic cross in Illustrator with Shape Builder mainly. But what I'm going to do is also set the center point by using two guides. I just create a center point here, and then use the ellipse tool and start drawing from the center of that. Holding down Alt and Shift, you can draw from center outwards, and holding down Shift helps to keep it a perfect circle. So that's going to be my line. I'm just going to set it somewhere around there. So there's our line. And what I'm going to do after this is to have a color on the edges. I'm just going to use a different color now, like red. And let's make the edges thicker. So I'm going to use maybe 40 points. Okay, so that's the circle in the middle. Now I'm going to create a round rectangle using the round rectangle tool. Again, click in the center, hold down Alt, and you can start drawing. But I'm going to also use the up arrow to make sure it's completely round on the edges. Again, what I'm trying to create is the center line of that shape, because then it's going to fill it in or add that big stroke on it, or wide stroke on it. So that looks quite good. Now I'm going to copy, paste this, Ctrl-C, Ctrl-F in Illustrator, the way you should paste, because that's the paste in front, which pastes in exactly the same position as the original was, and then you can rotate it around. So we already have pretty much all the shapes that we need here. So I can even get rid of the guides now. I don't need those anymore. And what I need to do after this point is to turn these strokes into fills, because you can see here we have these nice outlines around these lines, and to be able to have that here, you either use the appearance panel or you turn these into actual shapes. I mean, not just strokes. At the moment they are just outlines, but these thick outlines can be turned into shapes. If you go to Object and then choose, there's two ways of doing it, either Path Outline Stroke or Expand. Both of them works, but I'm just going to use Path Outline Stroke. And you see now, all of these became shapes. So it's not an outline anymore, it's a shape. So for example, just to see what happened, if I now change this one to white, the fill to be white, and I add the stroke around them, a black stroke, and we are increasing that, you see it's already much closer to what we see on the left side. Right? Did that make sense? So the strokes became fields, and now we can add strokes around those fields. So it's a bit easier to work that way. And now that we have all these shapes together, let me just make the stroke a bit thinner, something like that. Now that we have all these shapes together, we can start using the Shape Builder tool, which is really cool. I love using this tool. This is the tool here. It's 2 circles and an arrow. That's the Shape Builder tool. Keyboard shortcut is Shift M. Once you have that selected, with this you can start combining the elements you have selected. It's important that you need to select the shapes you want to combine. Okay, if nothing is selected, Shape Builder tool won't be able to work. So first of all, make sure you have it selected, and then look what I'm going to do. I'm going to join up these parts here. Although they are completely separate objects, I can join them together. There's one joined there, the other one is there, the other one is there, other one is there. Then I can see this should be also joined up, so I'm just going to draw over these here. That should be repeated there, that should be repeated there, and there. And then in the middle, this should be all joined up, so I go around it. That should be also joined here, and that one. So it's again just repeating the same step, and look at that, it's done. So so this is the Shape Builder tool's advantage, that you actually, I only created 3 shapes, a circle and 2 rounded rectangles, and how quickly we managed to create a very complex shape. And to be honest, in Celtic crosses, I'm a big fan of them. This is a very simple one. There's really complex ones. So it's a really good exercise if you go home and want to practice Shape Builder tool. Celtic crosses or henna is another one in the Indian art, which is also a great one to practice with, this tool. So try to fit geometric shapes onto these symbols, and then try to create something quickly like this. But this is not all, because we have field colors on the actual shape. So to have the field colors, I show you another tool which you can use. So I'm just going to select this and change to the tool which is directly together with the Shape Builder tool. There's a reason, because they work hand in hand. The Live Paint Bucket tool. So if you select that, with that one you can actually access any area which is enclosed by cards. Even if it's not the same shape, again it can detect the contours. So these are all different shapes, but these edge or details in between can be filled in with a color, and it uses your swatches. So whatever swatches you have in the document can be used quickly with the Paint Bucket tool, or this Live Paint Bucket tool. Using right and left arrows or up and down arrows, you can go through the swatches. So what happens if you keep an eye on the swatches as well while I'm doing this, with the up and down arrow, I actually can't show that at the same time, but with the up and down, right and left, you actually go around in this grid of swatches. So if I have that color selected, you see the neighboring colors. That's what you will see there on the cursor as well. So right and left, up and down, it's actually going around them. So let's use black and do the same thing what we see on the left side, and look how quickly I managed to fill in those gaps. So we have the black detail there. And if I want, I can also, let's say, use red, and then let's make this shape here red, so it nicely goes around. Let's make the next one yellow, and then make the next one, let's say, the cyan color. So just the way we did the Shape Builder, we also managed to color it very quickly. And whoever was here on my first presentation learned how to work with the recolor artwork. I'm going to show you that again here quickly. So using the artboard tool, hold down Alt, I create a duplicate, select this one here, and click on recolor artwork, which is there on the top. So once you have some colors, you can very easily change them by going to the Edit menu. Here you can access each of these colors individually. So see how quickly I can change the colors around. And if I like a harmony between the colors, so for example, I can even go on the top and choose monochromatic 2, which is quite nice, or analog colors, they are quite nice, although they are a bit too close to each other. Maybe monochromatic, it looks quite nice. If I like this harmony between the colors, I can lock that harmony. It's already linked here because we selected the harmony rule, and then I can just move around and choose different colors for my shape. Okay, so that's quite nice way to recolor your artwork, and you can also reduce and increase the brightness as well. You can even see the colors being used side by side, and you can do so many different things with the recolor artwork. So it's definitely recommended to try that out as well. Okay, now going back to Bridge, I show you another example, which is a bit of a crossover between the two examples I showed you so far. This is going to use again tracing and live paint combined. So I'm just going to create a new artboard for this, just to prepare. I'm going to create the artboard and place this in. Shift O is the artboard tool, and then you just draw the artboard. And by the way, if you want, you can export these artboards separately into JPEG, PNG, EPS, AI, PDF, whatever you want. So that's why it's important to use artboards, because then you can separate your work. When you need to export it, you will be able to target, let's say, just that one, and you don't have to worry about the others. And you should, whenever you work in Illustrator, you should try to keep everything that relates to a project. So if you are working on a branding, all the stationaries can be in one file. You don't have to separate it. It's much easier to combine things when you have it in one place, and just use separate artboards for each of them. Let's say business card, front, back, 2 artboards. Letterhead, another artboard. Logo can be in another artboard, and so on and so forth. You can have up to 99 artboards in an Illustrator file. Okay, so we have this artboard here, and I'm going to place this one there. I can drag and drop it into Illustrator, or use the place command. I'm just going to make it a bit smaller, and you can see this is more like an Indian or Asian pattern, which is also very nice and good to practice with. It's a hand-drawn illustration, and it's very complex. Remember the one with the robot I did in the beginning? Compared to that, this has a much better like contrast, much stronger lines, more well-defined lines, and there's no scribbly lines. This one is very clean. It's done with ink or pen, and it's much stronger than a pencil drawing. So if we go on image trace, you will be surprised, but it will actually work perfectly with this. It will manage to keep most of the details, and it will be perfect to use. So look at that. That's already the vector artwork. So it really depends how strong your lines are. If you use scans, make sure you use really strong lines and add contrast on it if you need in Photoshop, because that can help a lot. So it's not about the complexity of the drawing, it's about the contrast in the drawing. Okay, that matters for tracing. So that is brilliant, it's perfect auto trace.
Can you go into any section and alter the shape?
Yes, you can, but for that you have to expand this. To be able to expand it, but just by the way, I just show you that it created 19,000, almost 20,000 anchor points. We don't see those anchor points, but once we extract this and choose expand, that's when we start to see how much work went in there. So all those little anchor points, you remember when I drew the plaster and the head, there was like 20 anchor points. This is 20,000 anchor points. So obviously it's not that easy to modify them, but there's so many different tools in Illustrator which you can use to play around with these details if you want to refine them. But what I usually do after this point is coloring this. So how do we color it? Well, using the Live Paint Bucket tool. Now that it's selected, I can choose the Live Paint Bucket, the one we use for the Celtic Cross as well, and let's just click somewhere in here. It will take some time to first turn this into, all these 20,000 anchor points into a live paint group, but as you can see, it already started working. But unfortunately, because of all those little points, I can't really see what's happening. I mean, it's very difficult to see what's going on. So in these cases, the best thing to do is to choose the option under the View menu to hide these details. They are called edges. and you can use Command H or Control H. Once you do that, let me show you, you can actually see a much better way of working, where you can still see the edges on which you can draw over. So I can very quickly draw over details and fill these details in with colors, and I can still switch between colors. Remember, right and left arrows can switch between the colors you have, and then you can use different colors for different parts of the illustration. So how cool is that? How easy is that? Oops, I just clicked on the outline. The only thing you have to really be careful is not to click on the outlines. But apart from that, you can see how easy it is. And if you want to pick a color that you already used, just hold down Alt and click. That picks up the previous color you used, and then you can carry on drawing with that color, and so on and so forth. So after this point, you can see that it's really just a matter of time to be able to go around it and draw over all the details. It's still time consuming, but this is what they use in comic books. In comic books, and also in cartoons. Like, not every cartoon, but some cartoons actually use still these type of techniques for coloring. But definitely comic books, especially the ones with sharp, well-defined edges, they use these techniques, like Garfield, for example. I know it's drawn in Illustrator with this technique. So now that we saw this as well, let me go back again and show you another example. So it's all good that we can use hand-drawn illustrations or just use references whenever we want to draw. But what if we want to create something from scratch in Illustrator? You can either use brushes. Let me just go back to Illustrator again, create a new artboard, and you can either use brushes and draw with them, and of course if you have a tablet, your lines will be much more fluid and much more natural, especially if you start using not the brush tool but the blob brush tool, because the blob brush tool has even a pen pressure sensitivity that you can align or assign to the size, angle, and the roundness of your brushes. That's the blob brush just directly below the brush tool, and it has, if you double click on the tool in the toolbar, it has this option called size, which you can change to pressure and then increase the variation to maximum. You can see then the pressure sensitivity of the tablet can be assigned to the brush itself, and then look how nicely I can draw. In one line I can vary the width of my brush, and all this is actually vectors. So that's the amazing thing about it. So I drew a very nice fluid line. Shift B is the blob brush's shortcut. So I can draw very nice fluid lines, and all this is still vectors, right? So if you want to draw more like the way you would draw on paper, this is really the tool that gets close to what you would be able to do with like ink or paint. You can see how it works, and you can also change let's say charcoal, choose charcoal style on your drawing, and I look at that. I draw actually on the charcoal. We have to go to the brush. It's better to use the different styles with the brush and not the blob brush. So with the brush, there's more like a charcoal line. You can see it even has that nice fade on it. And we can choose lots of different brush styles. You can have like artistic brushes, let's say paintbrush, and then I select one of these and I can draw with that, and then it looks more like a paint brush line. Okay, so you can find loads of different brushes here. So if you want to go for a bit more interesting but still fluid lines, you can use the brushes, or you can work again with shapes. Now with shapes, I don't know if I have enough time. Hopefully I have enough time to do this. I just show you the final result. This is what I'm going to try to do in 10 minutes. So there's this little cute panda head. If you look at this, it might look like a bit more complex drawing, but to be honest, it's very simple. It only uses circles. Everything you see here is just ellipses. Just one tool in Illustrator, the ellipse tool, and a couple of gradients on it. So, but of course, I'm going to combine the shape builder tool, use the selection tools, and rotate and reflect and stuff like that. But essentially, I'm just going to draw curves. So to be able to see the final result, I'm just going to open this up, Just going to ignore that, and we can see what we need to achieve. And I'm going to draw this on the side on another artboard. Okay, something like that. So first of all, what I'm going to do is to create a new shape here. I just go on create a new layer and create a rectangle, fill that in with a background color. So I'm just going to click on this background color there, which has a gradient, a radial gradient on it. Gradients you can set up in the gradient panel. That's where you can set up the color stops from white to green in this case, and you can decide whether it's a linear or radial gradient. So that's our gradient. We can lock that layer. That's going to be the background. I create a new layer, and on that I use the ellipse tool. So I selected the ellipse tool, press D, which defaults back to the white fill black stroke, and I draw my first ellipse. So that's going to be the head of the panda. But when I look at this, it doesn't have that nice shape what I have on the other one. What I need to do is to select these points individually, like select these 2 points here with the direct selection tool and use the arrows to shift it down a bit. And then I can also select this one here on the top and use the arrows on my keyboard to shift it down. Or I can also drag these points out a bit if I want to change the form of the shape. Something like that, or I can go a bit closer. So it's customizing the shape is what's important. So although I start with a very simple shape, an ellipse, I can always customize it later on. And one of the things I would do immediately is get rid of the stroke. We don't need the stroke, so I set it to 0. It's a nice white shape. And then I just going to add a gradient on this as well. Now the gradient is again here in the gradient panel, and I'm just going to click on the drop down and I choose fade to black and change one of these color stops to white. So I select white and change the opacity of that to 100%. So we have a white to black fade. Change the black point as well to a like lighter gray value, something like that, and change the type to radial. And then here with this icon I can reverse the gradient, so the black or the darker gray is on the edges and the white is in the middle. So now I can see it looks already much more three-dimensional. And if you are not happy with the shape itself of the gradient, either use this option, the aspect ratio, or select the gradient tool. And with the gradient tool you can actually align the gradient shape to the shape of the object that you are drawing. So see, now it looks much more three-dimensional thanks to the alignment of the gradient to the shape. And I can still adjust it, so I can still adjust the distance between the two colors, so where the white should appear and where the gray should appear, so the balance between these two, or the transition between the two. And look how nice three-dimensional that looks already. Well, it looks a bit different on the screen than here on my computer. Usually gradients look a bit different on projected images. And then, okay, I have 5 minutes, plenty of time. So I'm going to draw the eyes now. For the eyes, again, I use the ellipse tool. Let me draw that here. That's going to be the eye. I've switched back to black. If you have white fill black stroke, to quickly swap the two and have black stroke and black fill white stroke, Shift X swaps the two attributes on the selected object. Very useful shortcut as well. Shift X swaps between the two, and then I'm just going to get rid of the stroke because I only need the black fill. And once again, what I did in the previous example, on the head, I'm going to select each of these points individually and just shift them around a bit until I get a little bit more custom form or custom shape on the patch behind the eye. I won't do it exactly the same as the other one. It's always good to do something differently just to see how the character changes. And then I would be able to add a gradient on that as well, but I'm not going to be bothered with that. I'm just going to draw quickly the ears as well. Actually, I can just duplicate this one, right click on it, and then choose arrange send to back. As it's in the back now, I can rotate it around. I can make it a little bit bigger, and again you see that's the cool thing about working with objects in Illustrator, that you can very easily draw things behind. So you don't have to draw around the edges, you just simply place it behind. And for example, this one can be copy pasted, so duplicated, made smaller, and just reduce increase the brightness of it a bit, and it already creates the effect that we need. So you have a nice little shape there for the ears. Now we can group these together, and that's a very important step what I'm going to do here. To quickly rotate this onto the other side, what I'm going to do is select these two together and choose the option here from the toolbar called Reflect Tool. Keyboard shortcut is O. With this one, you click on one of the center points. Usually the top or the bottom will have a center point, especially if you work with ellipses. So if you click on that, that defines the center. And then holding down Alt and Shift together, you can rotate, align, and duplicate at the same time. So Alt and Shift together, rotate around the center point, align, and duplicate. So I'm going to do the same with the eyes. I'm just going to quickly draw the eye. Hold down Shift with the ellipse tool, draw the eye. This is going to be white fill. Actually, I can press D, that will revert back to that. And I'm just going to draw another ellipse on top of this. So let me just position this a little bit smaller, something like that. And I just zoom closer and draw it quickly. So duplicate this ellipse and select that. And that will, in the middle, is going to be the one with blue. So I select the blue or cyan color. We don't need the stroke on this. And then we can have another one again, copy, duplicate, make it smaller, set it back to black, revert, get rid of the stroke. So we have the colors, make it a bit cross-eyed, always helps to make it more cute. And then then we add 3 reflection points or 1 reflection point, whether you like the Japanese type of drawing or the more European one. Japanese drawings usually have these 3 reflection points, which is quite nice. I quite like that. Again, makes it really cute. So if we zoom out, you can see we have those 3 points. The reflection is usually good to have the bigger one on top, and it's too small to see these changes. It's usually better, looks better if we have this one on the top, something like that. So once we have the eye, we can, it actually looks a little bit too cross-eyed now. So let me select these and that. The eye, I can't select properly. Come on. Yeah, it's too small. Yeah, I just move this a little bit to the left. So what I'm going to do, group all this together. What you can also do, which is quite useful, if you know that you don't need an object to work with, select it and press Control 2 or Command 2 to lock. Then it's locked. And then you can select the rest, like the eye in this case, and then group it together with Control G. Control 2 locks objects, and Control Alt 2 unlocks them. So I created this. Again, I'm going to use the Reflect tool. Click here on the top, and then, reflect, click there on the top, Alt Shift click, drag it to the other side, and then when we have the eye on the other side, we can quickly create the nose. So for that, I would again use an ellipse like this, use black fill on it, no stroke, and then I can zoom closer, again use the direct selection tool, bend it down a bit, and you should already have the shape we need. So see how quickly you can create things. Then to create the mouth, what I'm going to do again is to draw an ellipse. There's one ellipse there. Hold down Alt, Shift, and drag this one a little bit to the side. Select these two, right? These two select. Shape Builder, hold down Alt, and remove these two. So Shape Builder can remove, subtract, not only add together. So we have this shape. Again, I'm going to reflect it around its center point and duplicate. There's the two shapes together. I move one onto the other a bit. Use Eraser, holding down with the Eraser tool, hold down Alt. You can create a shape like that. So cut into it, group these together, and there's the mouth. At the moment, it looks like the mustache, but I'm going to make it bigger, smaller, and there's your mouth as well. So that's how much time I had. So it was a little bit rushed, as you can see, and not as nice as the other one. There we have more gradients on it, but you have the general idea that either pen tool, either brushes, or either just simply using shapes, it's very quick and easy to create artwork in Illustrator. I focused in this presentation on Illustrator, but Photoshop is just as interesting to create artwork. depending on what style you want to achieve. So I hope you liked this presentation. I hope you had a good day. And make sure you stay for the drinks and then we can talk. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer everything. Thank you very much.